Hello, and welcome to I Hate Talking, a podcast about talking, including etymology, frustrating topics, current events, and other random subjects. I'm Adam.
And I'm Steph. We are married, and we invite you into these discussions with us as we talk about the good and the bad of talking.
We hope you enjoy today's episode. Welcome to episode 35 of I Hate Talking.
Hi, everyone.
Crazy that we have recorded 35 episodes.
That is a lot of episodes, and it's been a lot of fun, so I'm glad we've done this.
Indeed, it is a good way to grow old together.
35 was a good year. I remember it explicitly, and
1935?
No! I don't remember 1935. I remember being 35, and that was a good year.
When you were aged 35.
When you and I were both age 35, I feel like that might have been the sweet spot for us. It was a good year.
Indeed, I think you're probably right. All right, this word is related to something that we started to discuss in our previous episode with perhaps that older generation loving some odd or new things within their experience. So this word is neophilia.
Neophilia?
Neophilia.
Okay, that does not sound like a legitimate word.
So to some degree, it's not really like a widely accepted English word. It is a word made up of Greek and Latin phrases to literally mean love of the new.
Neophilia, love of the new. I would not have guessed that, actually. Hearing it, neophilia, I feel like, again, this is showing my lack of knowledge, but I think of like negative things. I don't even want to say it on here. And the word you thought I was saying was different. So every word that comes with philia seems to be negative. Words we can't put on this podcast because we don't want that kind of rating. So are there any other philias that are not in the adult rated category?
So philia, to just cover the bases there, is from the Greek word that means friendship, affinity, or love. Typically refers to brotherly love, so some form of affection or friendship. So it is different from the Greek word eros, which usually means more of a romantic love, or agape, which means a spiritual love. But that this is philia in terms of that brotherly love.
Philadelphia,
exactly.
Okay, so when I said, and you both, again, off air, said what word comes to our mind, something philia, and both of us said, well, we can't put that on the radio. Both of those were a form of quote-unquote love, right? So you're putting something and then what you love.
Precisely.
Okay.
One of the positive words that is associated with philia is audiophile, who is a person who is enthusiastic about high fidelity sound reproduction, or a bibliophile or bibliophilia, who is a person who loves and collects books, often with an extensive
I've heard that phrase. Yep.
library. There's also a cinephile, which is likewise somebody that is fond of the art of the cinema or movies. There's a word logophilia, which is associated with the love of words and language. Also can mean those enthusiastic about symbology.
So would it be fair to say then that anything that ends in philia is not necessarily bad, because some things are good, some things are bad that we know of, but that it's abnormal or not the norm? If you're a bibliophilia, you love books more than your average person. Is that a fair thought of this?
I think so. And actually, there's maybe a improper use or a co-opting of the word philia in terms of brotherly affection with some of the other words that may be associated with that root word, and that those should actually be more associated with the Greek root word eros rather than philia.
Okay. What does eros mean?
So, as stated in the very start of the episode, eros will typically have to do more with the physicality or passionate side of love.
So, a phrase I've heard multiple times by the Dr. John Deloney. He has a podcast. He is part of the Ramsey Corporation. He talks about eros and saying, make your home eros. And what he means by that is talking to your spouse and saying, when you come home from work, what do you want to feel? What do you want to see? And trying to make your home where both of you have this excitement and draw to each other versus just like the mundane humdrum of normal life. He's trying to say, like, way here, he's saying, like, make it exciting, make yourselves drawn to each other versus just being passing ships in the night. But he's the only one I hear on a regular basis talk about eros when he always is prompting people to find the eros in each other.
And that will typically have to do with relationships, typically of the husband and wife, that perhaps that he's getting at. But nonetheless, philia is what we have in mind for this particular episode, and neophilia specifically, in terms of what we were getting at in the last episode, with some of these novel things that we come to enjoy within the later stages of our life. So, for example, what I put into Google to arrive at this particular word of the episode is, quote, what is it called when old people enjoy novel things? And neophilia is the result. And that is how we arrived at our word or phrase of this episode, neophilia, as a description of old people enjoying novel things, or literally love of the new.
Okay. So neophilia means love of the new.
That is literally the meaning of the word, yes.
And it makes sense, right? When we were talking about philia, saying like it's a love for abnormal or not your typical thing. So this is something that an old person, that sounds so mean to say, but like an old person's love for something that isn't what you'd expect them to love. Or they find something later in life that they enjoy. Is that what we're thinking?
Precisely. Just
Okay.
like the artwork on the can of Pernicious IPA that we were discussing last episode, with some interesting, novel, non-standard plant life in some odd colors and shapes that are depicted thereon.
Okay, so we are not sponsored by them, but we wouldn't be opposed to it. Tell me why you're drawn to this artwork and the novel plant life.
So there is just some theories around this particular concept that as a child, you are enthralled with your world around you and everything that you're learning about, and new sights and sounds and even colors, as we were discussing about last episode, that you may discover a brand new color that you literally have never seen in your entire life before as a child. And that as you become older, there is less and less of that novelty. So you may not ever see a new color. Perhaps you've seen all the colors in the world in some hue or shade or saturation. Maybe it's a little bit different, but it will not really be necessarily novel to you. Same thing for perhaps plants or animals or things of within nature that you've seen a lot of those things, either in real life or in books and movies and studies and things of that nature, so that when you do encounter something truly novel, usually in a work of fiction or artwork, that because the way that the artist has rendered either those shapes or colors or depictions of novel plant life or animal life or structures or vehicles or anything that one can imagine, that older generations will be drawn to that because it triggers within them a childlike response in seeing something that is brand new and has never been seen before.
So do you think that you are drawn, or do you seek out more novel things as a whole, like foods you eat or things you see? Do you look for those novel, different things?
Yes, I think I do. Perhaps more within the works of fiction or artwork, where either those novel things are depicted in pictures or animations or movies, or even within the written word, that those novel depictions in whatever form they are found to be more interesting to me in my later years.
Would you rather watch a new show or new movie or rewatch something you know is good?
So typically it's going to be within the new category, and that if there is something that I have seen before, that it must be good, and that I'm not going to rewatch something that is mediocre or read something again that is mediocre. But I will typically make a very conscious decision to do that and perhaps revisit some of that, and maybe even do that in some reference to nostalgia, that I am actually seeking to recreate that initial experience of watching or reading or consuming that particular show or book or whatever the case may be. And that perhaps even upon the rewatch and am looking for something new and insightful that I did not see the first time around.
What do you think I do?
I think you watch things that you have watched before or read things that you have read before as a form of comfort because they are familiar.
Yeah. I mean, I occasionally watch other stuff. I obviously listen to some other stuff. But in general, I have my go-tos. Like every year, I read the book Stepping Heavenward. I know that theme front and back, but it is so enjoyable for me to either read or listen to. I also watch The Office and Gilmore Girls. Both of those shows are just like constant background noise to me. And yeah, they're just familiar, and I enjoy knowing what's coming. We're coming up on the holiday season. I love Hallmark, and I know it's a joke for many people, but I love Hallmark movies. I love how you can predict at the end everyone's happy and everyone's together in a happy ever after situation. I love that predictability. I feel like life in general, there's so many ups and downs. I love knowing that in an hour, it wraps up beautifully and everyone's smiling and happy. Because the real world, maybe tomorrow, is going to be hard. And I don't want to have to deal with hard right now. I want to enjoy something happy and know it's going to end happy.
So that's an interesting observation, that perhaps in the world of fiction that you do like things to be familiar and controlled, and in the real world are expecting chaos and unexpected things, whereas I enjoy the novel and unexpected things within the world of fiction, and in an attempt to control the real world, try to make everything familiar and routine.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So that's super interesting because I feel like in general, if you talk about how we live our lives, I'm much more like, hey, it's great weather. Let's go outside. Let's go to the zoo. There was legitimately a conversation we had earlier. Like, it's great weather. We should go to the zoo. But we didn't go because we didn't have it planned because of family people in our house that love plans. And we were busy with other stuff. So, like, it just wasn't practical. But if it was up to me, we would have gone to the zoo. It was a great day. And things like that, where I'm like, hey, let's do this today. Where you and maybe some other people in our household would get thrown off and really bothered by this instant moment change in plans. So it's funny that, like, in leisure time, I want predictability and I want that happy ever after constantly. But in real life, when I'm doing something, I'm much more prone to spontaneous bursts of energy and excitement. Where in shows, you want more of the excitement. You want more of the unpredictability or not necessarily happy ever afters. But in real life, you want to know what's coming next. You're very bothered when I'm like, hey, let's go do this. In 20 seconds, we're leaving. When you had no heads up ahead of time.
Precisely. And that was something that we discussed many episodes ago with even the way that we make decisions, that perhaps there will be some novelty in the things that I do or partake in terms of even a food menu, but that I will have that novelty contained within a very narrow scope of controlled expectations.
Okay, so I wonder why we're so vast, like in what I consume for entertainment or just background noise versus what you consume as entertainment and background noise and how we react with life. Because even our music, when you listen to music, often my heart rate just spikes because it's so loud and it's so intense. I'm like, let's just play some quiet, calm music, please. In general, our personalities are very different. I'm much more outgoing, much more loud than you are in your personality. So what does that mean? Or is that a common thing that people's recreation versus personality are so different? Or do we just complement each other so well?
Yeah, I think it probably does have some relationship to just the normal disposition of people, and that there are going to be a variety of dispositions, whether that be some of the things that we've discussed before in terms of introvert versus extrovert, or how you process verbally or non-verbally. And perhaps this is just yet another facet of the human psyche that makes people unique, is in terms of how they find and enjoy novelty.
I just wonder if there's something that we're not realizing that goes into, like, when I plan something, like my recreation, I want it planned and I want it to end all happy with a bow on top. But I'm okay in real life it not being like that. Where you're the opposite in your recreation and your TV shows or music, you're okay leaving it undone or very messy and sad. But in your life, you want it very wrapped up in a bow and expected.
That is true. Something perhaps that we can contemplate. Another example is the show on, I think it's Netflix. And yes, it is Netflix, in fact, because I had to buy an additional subscription just to finish watching this show, and did so because I enjoyed it so much. And that show is called Scavenger's Reign, and it's a relatively short series that is animated. And I don't think that you were able to even make it through the first 5 minutes of the first episode.
You said the name. I had no idea what you were talking about. Sorry.
You don't recall the show about a group of human people that crash land on an alien planet and are trying to scavenge all the parts and be able to escape the said planet that they have crashed landed on.
How many times did you try to get me to watch this? I don't know it at all.
Exactly my point. So I think a few times, and this show is within the vein of Neophilia very squarely because it depicts plant and animal life that is extremely alien, and the people within this particular work of fiction treat it almost normally, that it's not really all that odd, but it is definitively odd. But again, when you really compare what they are experiencing with some of the oddities in nature that we really do have, perhaps it's not really all that strange nonetheless, but that is, again, squarely within that concept of neophilia, with finding novelty in things that are extremely new.
So they're traveling the universe. They're seeing a bunch of new stuff. Is that what they were doing? They were traveling like in a spaceship?
Yes, and crash landed.
Okay, so they've seen very odd stuff, like not usual stuff that we would see here.
That was not really part of the actual narrative. It was just there, and that was like that everything that they were experiencing was in some way relatively normal.
So, and there's a correct answer to this, so make sure you pay attention. When you're talking about this word, you're saying that it's when you're older and you find enjoyment in new stuff. But you're saying that because I do not find enjoyment with new stuff, I enjoy watching the same things over again. You're saying I'm not old yet.
Yep, I guess you could interpret it that way.
Answer.
Right. Yep. So the interesting thing in the definition of neophilia is it is not necessarily used exclusively with older people, though it does seem to relate generally to older people finding things new and loving those things, but it can be used just in terms of love of the new in general.
Okay.
Without any regards to the person's age, old or otherwise.
So a young child tasting new foods, if they have enjoyment in finding new foods, they'd have neophilia. Where someone that gravitates towards avocado and sweet potatoes always would not have enjoyment in neophilia.
Perhaps, and maybe that even goes back to 2 episodes ago or 3 when we were talking about some of the things that twins either are picky eaters or not, that maybe people are predisposition to neophilia and enjoying new things, while others may seek out the more familiar things and be happy with that.
Oh man, we just need a bunch more twins to ask this question to.
So that is the show Scavenger's Reign that I did enjoy as sort of this neophilia and novel things.
When did you watch that? I do not have any recollection of it.
It was just a few months ago.
Oh. So, for background, for anyone who would be interested, we have kids, we put them to bed. We often will watch a show or podcast or talk about a book or anything like that. And so if we are going to watch a show together, that is the time after we put the kids to bed. Because otherwise we're watching Sonic or Boss Baby and all those sort of things as a family. But I often either will tell you I'm just tired, I'm going to go to sleep. Because I wake up way earlier than you as a whole. So I go to bed earlier than you. So I'll either watch and just you turn off the show when I fall asleep. That ends up what happens. I always fall asleep when we start a show. And if it's something I'm not interested in, I'm like, just finish it. I don't care. So is that one of those that you started and I fell asleep? You just continued on watching?
Yes, and I think I did not really try all that hard because I actually enjoyed it so much and sort of just very quickly gave up on you coming along.
Because you were anxious to watch it.
I was anxious to watch it. So
and
I actually ended up
not.
I think this would classify as binging the show because it has one season and it seems like probably it's only going to be one season. It's 12 episodes. They're on average 23 minutes long per episode. I was introduced to the show on September 19th, watched the first 4 episodes by September 20th, and finished all 12 episodes by September 25th.
Wow. So, yeah, I definitely had just fallen asleep and you just watched them all.
I think so.
Okay. But in fairness to you, because you don't do that often, it's not like you stay up all night long watching TV. Sometimes if it's a hard week, I'm like, we just need to laugh. Let's put on The Office. And you will. You enjoy The Office. But I think you don't get as much enjoyment rewatching it over and over. Where, like, to me, it's just like a mental break. Like, I need to not think about life right now. Let's just laugh at what insane thing Michael Scott is doing at this moment.
Precisely. And there are a few things that I do enjoy rewatching. But again, I think it almost would be for the purpose of finding something new within that particular work of fiction or even nonfiction.
So you'd watch it trying to find new stuff.
I think so, even with like The Office. And like I said at the very start, it has to be good. So that means that it is only the episodes with Steve Carell in them that I would rewatch. That I will watch those maybe to relive some of the jokes, but also maybe to pick up on some new character references or nuances or maybe some jokes that I've missed in the past that I did not fully appreciate. And one other, again, work of fiction that comes to mind that I've rewatched many, many times is the Matrix trilogy. But again, that is often when I'm rewatching that for the express purpose of finding something new in that particular trilogy.
What books? Are there any books that you reread as like a comfort or enjoyment?
So there is a book that comes to mind for the Neophilia, actually, before we talk about maybe a book that I will reread, and that is all the works by Jeff Vandermeer, who wrote the Southern Reach trilogy, again, about alien life and some odd scientific things with people going through portals and odd things within nature that, again, are novel in our experience of nature, but almost normal within how they were depicted within this particular work. And that actually was made into a feature-length film with Natalie Portman called Annihilation.
Have you watched that movie?
I have. You'd have too.
Oh, I don't remember it. Did I like it?
No, you hated it.
Oh, okay.
I think I may have been the only person that liked it. I think we went with your whole family, and I think everybody else hated it.
Yeah, my family's much more like slapstick comedy. That doesn't sound like that. I love that I don't even remember this at all. When was it aired?
It was from 2018.
Weird. I believe you. Our very first date, y'all, we met online and met in person and chatted for a while. And then, like, what do you want to do? Well, we're right in front of a movie theater because we met at a mall. So after walking the mall, we went to the movies. And I had to tell you on our very first date, I will fall asleep. Because it was very late at night. And, I mean, late for me. Y'all, like 9 o'clock is late for me. But it was late for me. And I knew that, like, when I sit down, I'm going to fall asleep. And I did. I fell asleep on our first date. I had to tell you, like, this has nothing to do with you. This is just, I'm going to fall asleep. And still to this day, it is so rare that I stay awake in a movie or show we watch. Yep, Annihilation. I don't remember it. Let me know if y'all have watched it and if you enjoyed it.
And to be fair, the book is far, far better than the movie was.
It usually is.
So going back to your question, as perhaps the final thing that we can discuss in this episode is books that I would reread.
Mm-hmm.
So
Bible doesn't count.
There would be probably some nonfiction books that would fall within that category with, either lifestyle type things with strategies like Joe DeSena's book with like Spartan or, things of that nature where there's a particular psychological aspect to a non-fiction book, or perhaps some of the books by Daniel H. Pink, like To Sell as Human and books like that. I don't know if there's a lot of nonfiction books that would fall within that category, though the ones that I'm looking at in my library are going to be actually ones that sort of, again, fall within this category of neophilia, where perhaps I'm going to reread them in an attempt to find even more novelty. So perhaps some of the old science fiction by Arthur C. Clarke, or some of the recent fiction by Dennis E. Taylor, where they are building worlds within their books of fiction that are far different than the natural world that I find myself in.
Yeah. For me, I either want something very novel or I want it to be very comedic.
So I guess perhaps our biggest insight from this conversation is that you enjoy the familiar in your entertainment, and I enjoy the familiar in the real world. And it will be interesting, perhaps, to contemplate that more in the future and consider how we might reconcile that or use that for our advantage.
Mhm.
So, from your friends at I Hate Talking, until next time, remember, it is only through talking that we begin the journey to understanding.